Have you ever watched someone decide what you were worth before you had the chance to speak? Before we begin, take a second and notice where you are watching from somewhere in this wide world, and what time the clock shows where you are right now. Because stories like this do not belong to one city, one country, or one kind of person. They happen anywhere pride speaks faster than truth. And on a cold Tuesday morning in downtown Baltimore, Truth was about to arrive wearing a faded work jacket. The sound came first. A clean, dry rip across the polished silence of Sterling National Bank. Conversation stopped. A printer hummed behind the counter. Somewhere near the entrance, the revolving door completed one slow turn and settled. Caroline Whitmore stood beneath the white marble lights with 2 pieces of a $5 million check in her hands. Her posture remained straight. Her navy blazer had no wrinkle. Her expression carried the calm certainty of someone who believed procedure could never be cruel. Across from her stood Darius Cole, 42 years old, 6 feet tall, his dark skin weathered by long days under construction lights and winter wind. Fine dust still clung to the shoulder of his brown canvas jacket. A red electrician's rag hung from one pocket. He looked less like a man carrying $5 million than a man who had spent the morning repairing someone else's broken building. That was exactly what Caroline had seen. Not his name. Not the embossed seal on the check. Not the legal folder beneath his hand. She had seen the jacket, the work boots, and the black single father standing beside a child with a yellow backpack. Then she had made the rest of the story herself. People like you do not walk into a bank with $5 million, she said quietly, as if lowering her voice could make the words respectable. Darius did not reach for the torn check. He did not raise his voice. He did not look toward the customers who had turned in their chairs. He looked down at his daughter. Maya Cole was 10, small for her age, with 2 neat braids and purple sneakers that barely touched the floor from the waiting chair. Her fingers had tightened around the straps of her backpack. Inside it was a drawing made with crayons the night before. A red brick building. Wide windows. Children reading beneath a painted sun. Above the door, in uneven blue letters, she had written Mom's Place. Maya stared at the paper in Caroline's hands. "Daddy," she whispered, "did we do something wrong?" That question moved through him more sharply than the tearing sound had. Darius crouched beside her and adjusted the loose lace on her left sneaker, taking his time as if the entire bank were not watching. "No, baby," he said. His voice was low. "Steady. Sometimes people get afraid before they get informed." Caroline's jaw tightened. "Mr. Cole, this transaction does not match your customer profile." Darius rose slowly. On the counter between them sat his driver's license, a signed transfer agreement from North Star Manufacturing, and the unopened documents for the Grace Harbor Initiative. Everything she needed was there, untouched. "You could call the issuing bank," he said. "You could read the paperwork. You could let your teller verify the routing number." Caroline glanced at Lena Brooks, the young teller who had tried twice to speak. Then Caroline folded the torn pieces together as though the matter were finished. "I know what fraud looks like." Darius held her gaze. No anger, no fear, just a stillness that made the marble lobby feel colder than before. "Then today," he said, "you may learn what the truth looks like." Behind Caroline, her office phone began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. She ignored it. She did not know that the man calling was her boss. She did not know he had spent 6 months trying to arrange a meeting with Darius Cole. And she did not know that before the morning was over, the same man she had dismissed without reading a single page would be addressed by the most powerful person in the building with one simple word. "Sir." Darius did not move from the counter. The bank seemed to move around him instead. Customers shifted in their seats. A man near the brochure stand lowered his phone. Lena Brooks kept her eyes on the torn paper, then on the documents Caroline had refused to open. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She had worked at Sterling National for 11 months. Long enough to understand when a manager wanted silence and when a customer deserved an answer. This time, those 2 things were not the same. "Ms. Whitmore," Lena said carefully, "the issuing bank is listed on the transfer agreement. I can verify it in less than a minute." Caroline turned toward her without raising her voice. "I said this matter is closed." Lena swallowed. The office phone rang again. Caroline ignored it again. Darius watched the exchange, then placed one hand on Maya's yellow backpack. "We can leave," he said. Maya looked up at him. "But what about Mom's Place?" The words were soft, but the room heard them. Caroline's eyes flicked toward the backpack. A corner of the crayon drawing had slipped from the zipper. Blue letters. A red brick building. Small stick figures holding books. Darius tucked the paper back inside. The building is not going anywhere, he told his daughter. Neither is the reason we came. Caroline folded her arms. Mr. Cole, you brought a suspicious financial instrument into my branch. Leaving does not make the concern disappear. Darius looked at the two pieces in her hand. No, ma'am. Verification makes the concern disappear. For the first time, something uncertain crossed her face. It vanished quickly. Caroline had built her career on being the person who did not hesitate. She had managed difficult audits, angry clients, and executives who measured confidence before competence. She had learned to make decisions fast because slow decisions were often blamed on women like her. Over time, speed had become instinct. Instinct had become certainty. And certainty had stopped asking questions. Lena lowered her gaze to the routing number still visible on one half of the check. She typed it into the internal verification system while Caroline turned back toward Darius. The screen loaded. Then Lena stopped breathing for a second. A green banner appeared across the top. Verified institutional transfer. Northstar Manufacturing. Authorized recipient. Grace Harbor Initiative. Beneath it sat a second notice in red. Priority relationship. Executive meeting scheduled. Contact regional president immediately upon arrival. Lena read the name twice. Darius Elijah Cole, founder and chairman. She looked across the lobby at the man in the dusty jacket, then at Maya, then at Caroline. Ms. Whitmore, she said louder now. Caroline did not turn. Not now. I think you need to see this. The office phone stopped ringing. A moment later, Caroline's mobile phone began vibrating against the glass counter. Jonathan Reed appeared on the screen. Regional president. Caroline silenced it with one touch. Darius noticed the name. He said nothing. Lena stood from her chair. The check is valid, she said. The words cut through the room more cleanly than the tear had. Caroline turned slowly. What did you say? The transfer is verified. The recipient is registered. The account paperwork matches. There is also an executive alert attached to Mr. Cole's name. Caroline looked at the monitor. Her face did not change at first. Then the color beneath her makeup faded. She leaned closer, reading each line as though the words might rearrange themselves if she waited long enough. They did not. Darius placed his identification back into the folder. I asked you to check, he said. No triumph. No sharpness. That made it worse. Caroline looked toward the torn check in her hand. For the first time that morning, she seemed to understand that paper could be replaced, but a moment could not. Then the front doors opened, and Jonathan Reed walked in with 3 senior executives behind him. He scanned the lobby, saw Darius standing beside Maya, and changed direction immediately. Jonathan Reed crossed the marble floor without greeting anyone else. He was 57, silver-haired, measured, and known throughout Sterling National for remembering names that most executives never bothered to learn. That morning, he remembered only one. Mr. Cole, he said, extending his hand. Then his eyes moved to Maya. And Miss Cole. Sir, I am sorry we kept you waiting. The words settled over the lobby. Sir. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Yet every person in the room felt the balance shift. Darius accepted the handshake with the same calm he had shown at the counter. Good morning, Mr. Reed. Jonathan glanced at the unopened folder, the security officer standing nearby, and the 2 torn pieces in Caroline's hands. His expression tightened. Would someone explain what happened? Caroline stepped forward. Her voice remained professional, but the certainty had left it. There was a concern regarding the transaction. I believe the check required additional review. Jonathan looked at Lena. Was it reviewed? Lena hesitated, then answered. Not before it was damaged, sir. Jonathan turned back to Caroline. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. You destroyed a verified financial instrument before completing verification? Caroline opened her mouth, but no answer came. Darius looked down at Maya, who was studying Jonathan with cautious curiosity. He rested a hand on her shoulder. Jonathan followed his gaze and softened. Miss Cole, I apologize for what you had to witness. Maya glanced at her father before speaking. Are we still going to build the place? Jonathan blinked. The place. Maya pulled the crayon drawing from her backpack and held it against her chest. Mom's place. It is not the real name, but that is what I call it. Darius gave her a small smile. Grace Harbor Learning Center, he explained. My wife worked nights when Maya was younger. She used to say every child deserved somewhere safe to land before their parents came home. Jonathan looked at the drawing, then at the torn check. The meaning of the meeting became heavier. The $5 million is for the center? Every dollar, Darius said. Caroline stared at him. Until that moment, she had assumed the money belonged to him in the simplest way money could belong to someone. A reward, a purchase, a symbol. She had not imagined it was already promised to children he might never meet. Jonathan shook his head slowly. Northstar told us the transfer came from the sale of an electrical safety patent. Darius nodded. Grace and I started the design at our kitchen table. I finished it after she passed. His voice did not break. It simply grew quieter. The money carries her name. I intend to make sure it carries her purpose too. No one in the lobby moved. Even the phones seemed distant. Jonathan turned toward Caroline. Mr. Cole came here today as the founder of one of the largest neighborhood redevelopment projects this bank has considered in years. More importantly, he came here as a customer. Either reason should have been enough for dignity. Caroline looked at Darius. Mr. Cole, I was wrong. He held her gaze, but he did not rescue her from the silence. Some apologies needed room to stand on their own. I judged the situation too quickly, she continued. I did not review your documents. I did not listen to my employee. I embarrassed you in front of your daughter. Darius glanced at the customers still watching. You did. 2 words. Calm. Honest. Caroline lowered her eyes. Jonathan reached for his phone. I will have a replacement issued immediately, and we will move this meeting to the executive conference room. Darius did not follow him. Before we do that, he said, I need an answer. Jonathan paused. Caroline looked up. Darius placed the folder beneath his arm. What would have happened if the check had been for $500 instead of $5 million? The question hung in the bright lobby, and no one had a prepared response. Jonathan Reed did not answer immediately. He looked around the lobby as though the question had changed the architecture of the room. The marble was still polished. The lights were still bright. Yet the bank no longer felt impressive. It felt exposed. If it had been $500, Jonathan said carefully, the same standards should have applied. Darius gave a slow nod. That is not what I asked. Caroline's fingers tightened around the torn paper. She knew the difference. Everyone did. Darius was not asking what the policy claimed. He was asking what the people inside the building would have done. Lena stood behind her terminal, silent but steady. Jonathan turned toward her. Ms. Brooks. Lena took a breath. I would have verified it, she said. I tried to verify this one. Caroline closed her eyes for half a second. It was barely a pause, but Darius noticed. He noticed everything people try to hide inside small movements. And if I had come alone, he asked, without a meeting on your calendar? Without a $5 million project attached to my name? Jonathan looked at Caroline. This time, she did not look away. I might have asked you to leave, she admitted. Her voice was quieter now. I might have filed an internal report before checking the documents. Maya shifted beside her father. Darius placed his hand gently over the top of her backpack. That is the problem, he said. Not the check. Not the amount. The moment before the facts. Caroline lowered the 2 pieces onto the counter. The torn edges did not meet cleanly. I thought I was protecting the bank. From what? Darius asked. She had no answer that would not reveal more than she wanted seen. Jonathan stepped closer to the counter. We will review every part of what happened here. Darius looked at him. A review written by executives will not be enough. Jonathan's expression sharpened, not with offense, but attention. What would be enough? Darius glanced toward the waiting area. An older woman held a deposit envelope in both hands. A delivery worker stood near the door, his uniform damp from the cold. A young mother balanced a sleeping child against her shoulder while searching through her purse. Ordinary people. People who entered banks carrying more worry than money. Ask them, Darius said. Ask the people who come through this door what dignity feels like when they do not have an appointment upstairs. Jonathan followed his gaze. Something in his face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Caroline looked toward the same customers, perhaps seeing them for the first time without sorting them into risk categories. Her phone vibrated again. She turned it face down. The gesture was small, but it was the first decision she had made that morning without hiding behind urgency. Mr. Cole, she said, I cannot undo what Maya saw. Darius looked at his daughter. Maya was studying the torn check with the serious expression of a child trying to understand why adults made simple things difficult. No, he said. You cannot. Caroline swallowed. Then let me begin with the truth. I saw your clothes. I saw your work boots. I saw your skin. I decided what kind of man you were before I read your name. The lobby went still again. This silence was different. It did not protect anyone. It made honesty unavoidable. Darius did not thank her for admitting it. Truth was not a favor. What happens next matters more than what you call this moment, he said. Jonathan motioned toward the elevators. The conference room is ready, but perhaps the meeting should begin here. Darius looked at Lena. She should be part of it. Caroline turned toward the young teller. Surprise crossed her face, followed by shame. Jonathan nodded. Agreed. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out the drawing of Mom's place. She placed it carefully between the two halves of the check. Bright crayon beneath torn paper. A building imagined by a child beside a mistake made by adults. Caroline stared at it. My mother used to work nights, Maya said. Daddy says the center is for children who have to wait. Caroline looked at Darius. Wait for what? He picked up the drawing, careful not to crease it. For someone to remember they matter. Then he walked toward the elevators with Maya beside him, while Caroline remained at the counter for one more breath, looking at the two pieces of paper she could replace and the trust she could not. The executive conference room sat 12 floors above the lobby, wrapped in glass and quiet enough to make every movement feel deliberate. Darius entered with Maya at his side. Jonathan followed, then Lena, then Caroline. 3 other executives remained near the far end of the table, their folders open but untouched. No one seemed certain whether they were attending a banking meeting or witnessing the beginning of something that would outlast one. Maya chose the chair beside her father and placed her yellow backpack between her shoes. Darius set the Grace Harbor documents on the table. Caroline sat across from him. For the first time that morning, she had no counter between them, no polished desk, no title displayed on a brass plate. Only distance. Jonathan began carefully. Mr. Cole, Sterling National still wants to support the Grace Harbor Learning Center. We can replace the check, complete the deposit, and assign a senior team to your account today. Darius rested both hands on the closed folder. That would solve the transaction. Jonathan understood. But not the problem. No, sir. Caroline looked at him when he used the word. There was no mockery in it. Darius gave respect because it belonged to his character, not because the room had earned it. Jonathan leaned back. Then tell us what the problem requires. Darius glanced through the glass wall at the city below. Cars moved along the wet streets. People hurried beneath dark coats, each carrying a private reason to be somewhere. Grace worked the overnight shift at St. Agnes Hospital, he said. For 6 years, she came home after sunrise. I handled breakfast. She handled bedtime. We built our life in the hours other people overlooked. Maya smiled faintly at the memory. When Grace got sick, the neighborhood helped us. A retired teacher watched Maya. The mechanic across the street brought groceries. People who did not have much gave what they could. He opened the folder and slid a photograph across the table. It showed an abandoned red brick school with boarded windows and weeds along the front steps. This building sits 3 blocks from our apartment. The city closed it 11 years ago. We want to reopen it as a place for children whose parents work late, double shifts, or jobs without reliable hours. One executive studied the photograph. How many children? 180 in the first year. More once the second floor is repaired. Caroline looked at the image. The building was not impressive. It had no glass entrance, no marble. Yet the care in Darius's voice gave it more weight than the tower around them. Jonathan asked, what does that have to do with what happened downstairs? Darius turned toward him. Everything. He opened another page. Families like the ones we serve are often asked for more proof, more patience, and more humility than everyone else. They walk into places like this already expecting to be doubted. Most do not have $5 million behind their name. They do not have a regional president waiting upstairs. Lena lowered her eyes. Caroline did not. She forced herself to listen. So what are your conditions? Jonathan asked. Darius raised one finger. First, create a verification process that begins with evidence, not appearance. A second finger. Train every employee in this branch, including senior management, and include the people who greet customers, not only the people who write policy. A third. Set aside a community banking team for customers who live paycheck to paycheck, customers who need help understanding fees, credit, and small business loans without being made to feel foolish. Jonathan wrote each point down. And the fourth. Darius looked at Caroline. Ms. Whitmore comes to Grace Harbor. Her expression changed. For a tour. For 6 months. The room grew still. 2 Saturdays each month, he continued. No press release. No photographer. No executive assistant. She works with the families the bank says it wants to serve. Caroline looked toward Jonathan, but he gave her no escape. Why me? She asked. Darius answered without anger. Because policy changes when people write new rules. People change when they learn to see. Maya reached into her backpack and placed a blue crayon on the table. We still need someone to paint the reading room, she said. Caroline looked at the crayon, then at the child she had embarrassed less than an hour earlier. I do not know how to paint a room, she admitted. Maya shrugged. My dad says learning starts when you stop pretending you already know. Darius looked at his daughter, surprised. Jonathan almost smiled. Caroline did not. Her eyes had filled with something quieter than shame and more demanding than regret. She picked up the blue crayon. Then I suppose, she said, I should start learning. The meeting ended without applause. Jonathan Reed approved every condition before the coffee on the side table had cooled. Lena was assigned to the new community banking team, and a replacement transfer was scheduled for the same afternoon. Caroline remained seated after the others stood. The blue crayon rested beside her hand, small and ordinary against the dark wood. Darius gathered the Grace Harbor documents while Maya slipped the photograph of the abandoned school back into her yellow backpack. Mr. Cole, Caroline said. Darius paused. I understand why you do not trust me. He looked at her for a moment. Trust is not something you explain your way into. Caroline nodded slowly. Then I will show up. Saturday morning. 8 o'clock. I will be there. Darius held her gaze. The families arrive before 9. The work starts before they do. She understood the correction. This was not an invitation to observe. It was an expectation to serve. For days later, Caroline parked her silver sedan beside the old school 3 blocks from Darius's apartment. Rain from the night before had left shallow puddles along the cracked sidewalk. The red brick building stood behind a chain-link fence, its windows covered with plywood and its front steps worn smooth by decades of children who no longer passed through its doors. Caroline checked the time. 7:42. She wore jeans, work shoes, and a plain gray sweatshirt that still held the sharp folds of something recently purchased. Her phone vibrated before she reached the gate. Then again, she looked at the screen, silenced it, and placed it inside her canvas bag. Darius was unloading paint cans from an aging pickup truck. He wore the same brown jacket from the bank, now over a dark thermal shirt. A paper cup of black coffee sat on the tailgate beside a toolbox. He noticed Caroline, but did not appear surprised. You are early, he said. I did not want to begin with another mistake. Darius handed her a pair of work gloves. Then start with those. Inside, the building smelled of dust, old wood, and fresh primer. Morning light entered through a row of newly uncovered windows, falling across stacked chairs and boxes of donated books. Maya sat on the floor with Lena, sorting children's stories by reading level. Several neighborhood volunteers moved through the hallway carrying brushes, drop cloths, and folding tables. No one treated Caroline like an executive. Most did not know she was one. Darius led her to a room at the end of the hall. Faded alphabet letters still stretched across one wall. This will be the reading room, he said. Caroline studied the peeling paint. Maya mentioned blue. Grace liked blue, Darius replied. His voice softened, but only slightly. She said it made small rooms feel like they had more sky. Caroline looked toward him, but he had already opened a paint can. He showed her how to load the roller without letting paint drip across the floor. Her first pass left an uneven stripe. The second was worse. Maya appeared in the doorway and tilted her head. You missed a spot. Caroline almost defended herself. The words rose automatically, polished and ready. Then she stopped. She looked at the wall again. You are right. Maya stepped inside, took a smaller roller, and covered the bare patch with 3 careful strokes. Daddy says you do not have to know everything to be useful. Caroline glanced at Darius. He was repairing an outlet near the window, giving them enough distance to speak without pretending not to hear. Your father says many things, Caroline replied. Maya smiled. Mostly when people need to hear them. By 9 o'clock, families began arriving. A nurse still wearing hospital scrubs brought her 2 sons. A city bus driver carried a box of donated lamps. An older man from across the street brought sandwiches wrapped in foil. Caroline watched Darius greet each person by name. He asked about school schedules, late shifts, and grandparents recovering from surgery. He remembered details no banking profile would ever contain. Then a woman approached Caroline with a stack of forms and asked, "Are you here to help?" Caroline looked at the paint on her gloves, the blue streak on her sleeve, and the room slowly becoming brighter behind her. For once, her answer required no title. "Yes," she said, "I am." The woman placed the forms in Caroline's hands and introduced herself as Denise Walker. She worked the evening shift at a nursing home and had 2 children who spent nearly 3 hours alone after school because the nearest program closed before her shift ended. Caroline looked down at the pages. They were not complicated. Income verification, emergency contacts, transportation needs. Yet several sections had been left blank. "I am not sure what they mean by household stability," Denise said. "Every place asks it differently." Caroline almost answered with the language she had used for years. Eligibility, documentation, compliance. Instead, she pulled a folding chair beside the window. "Tell me what your week looks like," she said. Denise sat slowly, as if she had expected instructions rather than interest. She explained the rotating schedule, the bus transfers, the neighbor who sometimes watched the children, and the late fee charged by another program whenever she arrived after 6 o'clock. Caroline listened without checking her phone. She wrote only what Denise told her. No assumptions. No shortcuts. Across the room, Darius lifted a box of donated books onto a shelf. He glanced toward them, then returned to his work. He did not praise Caroline. He did not need to. The lesson was happening without an audience. By noon, the reading room held 2 fresh blue walls and the smell of warm sandwiches. Volunteers gathered around folding tables while Maya passed out paper cups of lemonade. Caroline sat beside Lena, who was helping a bus driver named Samuel Price understand the difference between a secured credit card and a high-fee loan offer he had received in the mail. "The interest rate is hidden near the bottom," Lena explained. Samuel shook his head. "They make it sound like help until you read the price of it." Caroline recognized the bank that had sent the offer. Sterling National. The logo sat in the corner of the page, clean and familiar. Her stomach tightened. "May I see that?" she asked. Samuel handed it over. Caroline read every line. The offer was legal. It was also designed for someone too tired, too worried, or too trusting to calculate what the fees would become. "Did someone at my branch give you this?" she asked. "A representative called after I asked about a small business loan," Samuel said. "I wanted to repair my bus and start a weekend shuttle service. They said I did not qualify, but this could help build my credit." Caroline folded the letter carefully. "This will not help you the way they said it would." Samuel gave a tired smile. "I figured that out after the first payment." Darius had stopped working. He stood near the doorway, with a paintbrush resting across one palm. Caroline met his eyes. There was no accusation in his expression. That made the truth harder to avoid. "Bring your records to the branch Monday morning," she told Samuel. "Ask for me directly." He looked uncertain. "Are you a loan officer?" Caroline glanced at the blue paint on her sleeve. "I manage the branch." The room quieted. Denise looked up from her forms. Samuel leaned back in his chair. Caroline felt the weight of the title return, but it no longer felt like armor. It felt like responsibility. "Then why are you here painting walls?" he asked. Maya answered before Caroline could. "She is learning." A few people smiled. Caroline did not. She looked at Samuel and said, "I made a decision this week without seeing the person in front of me. Your letter tells me that was not an isolated mistake." Darius set the paintbrush down. "Systems learn from the people who run them," he said. "And people learn from what systems reward." Caroline nodded. "Then both have to change." Her phone vibrated inside the canvas bag. She left it there. After lunch, she helped Denise finish the forms, arranged a Monday appointment for Samuel, and asked Lena to collect every community complaint that had been dismissed as incomplete or unqualified during the previous year. Near the end of the day, Darius handed Caroline a clean roller and pointed toward the final unpainted wall. "You missed a spot," he said. She looked at the broad gray section, then at Maya, who was trying not to laugh. "I suppose I did." Darius opened another can of blue paint. "It happens when people look too quickly." Caroline accepted the roller. This time, she did not defend herself. She stepped closer to the wall and began again, slower than before. Monday morning arrived with low clouds pressed against the Baltimore skyline and a line of customers forming before Sterling National opened. Caroline was already inside. She had been there since 6:30, seated alone in the conference room with Samuel Price's loan file, Denise Walker's forms, and 12 months of rejected community applications spread across the table. The reasons looked reasonable when viewed one at a time. Insufficient history, irregular income, incomplete documentation, elevated risk. Together, they formed a pattern she could no longer pretend was accidental. People with stable salaries had been given time to explain. People with hourly wages had been given deadlines. Customers with polished resumes had been offered options. Customers wearing uniforms had been handed brochures. At 8:15, Lena entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She placed one beside Caroline. "You have been here all morning." Caroline looked at the pages. "I have been here for years. I am only beginning to see it." Lena sat across from her. She did not soften the truth. "You stopped me from checking his documents." "I know. You have stopped me before." Caroline lifted her eyes. Lena's voice remained respectful, but it no longer carried fear. "Not always like that. Sometimes you interrupt when a customer speaks slowly. Sometimes you assume a missing form means carelessness. Sometimes you tell us to protect the branch from people who are asking the branch for help." Caroline held the coffee without drinking it. "Why did you never say anything?" Lena gave a sad smile. "Because you were my manager and I needed the job." The sentence landed without drama. "That was why it stayed." Caroline nodded. "You should not have needed courage to do your work correctly." At 9 o'clock, Samuel arrived in his city bus uniform, carrying a worn folder secured with a rubber band. Darius came with him but stopped near the entrance. He wore his brown work jacket and held a black coffee in one hand. Maya was at school. This time, no one rushed toward him. No one whispered. No one called upstairs. He chose a chair in the waiting area and let Samuel walk to Caroline's desk on his own. Caroline stood. "Mr. Price, thank you for coming." Samuel looked at the office behind her. "Am I in trouble over that letter?" "No. The bank is." He studied her face, uncertain whether she was serious. Caroline invited him to sit and opened the loan file. She asked about his shuttle plan, the routes he wanted to serve, the cost of repairing the bus, and the customers he had already spoken with. Samuel answered carefully. At first, then the idea came alive in his voice. He wanted to drive hospital workers home after late shifts, help older residents reach grocery stores, and provide weekend transportation for families without cars. His plan was practical. His records were imperfect. His purpose was clear. Caroline listened until he finished. "The original application was denied because your income changes month to month," she said. Samuel nodded. "Over time changes. The bills do not." The denial treated inconsistency as irresponsibility. Those are not the same thing. She turned the file toward him. "We can restructure the request as a small business microloan with a 6-month payment reserve. Lena will help you complete the documents, and there will be no application fee." Samuel stared at the page. Why was that not offered before? Caroline did not hide behind policy. "Because we did not look long enough." Through the glass wall, Darius watched her answer. She did not look toward him for approval. That mattered. By noon, Denise arrived with her children and a folder of pay stubs from the nursing home. Caroline walked them through a low-fee checking account and removed 2 penalties that had been triggered when her paycheck arrived 1 day late. Then she asked Lena to schedule a weekly open hour for customers who needed help with forms, credit reports, or loan questions. No sales quotas. No rushed appointments. Jonathan Reed joined by video call and approved the pilot program for 3 branches. "We will announce this at the quarterly meeting," he said. Caroline glanced through the glass at Darius. "Not yet. Let us prove it works before we congratulate ourselves." Jonathan paused, then nodded. Near closing time, Darius approached her desk. The lobby was nearly empty. "Samuel called me," he said. He sounded hopeful. Caroline closed the last file. "Hope should not depend on knowing someone who can bring you back through the door." "No," Darius said. "It should not." She looked at him. "I kept expecting you to tell me I was doing better." Darius took a slow sip of coffee. "Were you doing it for me?" Caroline considered the question. "At first, perhaps. And now?" She looked toward Lena helping Denise's oldest son fill out a savings form. Now I think I understand that being forgiven is not the same as becoming different. Darius nodded once. That is a good place to begin. He turned toward the exit, then stopped. Saturday, 8 o'clock. Caroline almost smiled. I remember. Wear the old sweatshirt. Maya says the new walls need a second coat. After he left, Caroline remained by the glass doors, watching him cross the sidewalk beneath the gray afternoon sky. He had not restored her dignity for her. He had simply refused to take it away while she learned how to restore it herself. 6 months later, the old school no longer looked abandoned. Morning sunlight filled the blue reading room through restored windows, catching on shelves lined with donated books and small wooden tables built by neighborhood volunteers. The front steps had been repaired. The weeds were gone. Above the entrance, a new sign carried the name Grace Harbor Learning Center. Beneath it, in smaller letters, were the words Maya had written in crayon months earlier. A safe place to land. Darius stood near the front door in a clean dark jacket, one hand wrapped around a cup of black coffee. He watched families arrive in slow, hopeful groups. Denise Walker came straight from the nursing home with her 2 children. Samuel Price parked his newly repaired shuttle bus along the curb and helped 3 older residents step onto the sidewalk. His weekend transportation service had been operating for 2 months, and every loan payment had arrived early. Lena welcomed families at a folding table near the entrance. She was now the coordinator of Sterling National's community banking program, which had expanded from 3 branches to 12. Caroline arrived without an assistant, a photographer, or a speech prepared by someone else. She wore the same gray sweatshirt from her first Saturday, now marked with old blue paint that no amount of washing had removed. Her phone remained silent inside her bag. Maya spotted her and hurried across the lobby. You came early again. Caroline looked at the clock above the doorway. 7:38. Maya nodded with approval. You are improving. Caroline smiled. It was not the careful smile she once used in meetings. It reached her eyes now. I had a patient teacher. Maya glanced toward her father. He is not that patient. Darius heard her and raised an eyebrow. The reading room still has one crooked shelf. That was not me, Caroline said. That was definitely you, Maya replied. Their laughter moved easily through the building. Months earlier, Caroline would have noticed who was watching. Now she noticed who felt welcome. At 9 o'clock, Jonathan Reed gathered the volunteers and families beneath the restored school bell. He spoke briefly about partnership, responsibility, and the work still ahead. Then he invited Darius to cut the ribbon. Darius shook his head. Grace Harbor was not built by one person. He handed the scissors to Maya. She looked suddenly nervous. Caroline crouched beside her. You do not have to be unafraid, she said. You only have to know why you are doing it. Maya looked at the children waiting behind her, then at the photograph of her mother displayed near the entrance. She cut the ribbon. Applause filled the hall, warm and unpolished. Later, when the crowd moved toward the classrooms, Caroline found Darius standing beside a frame mounted on the main wall. Inside it rested 2 copied pieces of the check that had begun everything. The original replacement had funded the center months ago, but Darius had kept a record of the first one. Beneath the frame was a simple sentence. Paper can be replaced. Dignity should never have to be. Caroline stood beside him in silence. I used to think that day was the worst thing that ever happened to my career, she said. Now I think it was the first honest day I had in years. Darius looked at the frame. Honesty is only useful when it changes what comes after. It did. She told him that the bank had removed appearance-based risk language from its internal training, created an independent review process for disputed transactions, and approved 42 small community loans through the new program. More importantly, customer complaints were now reviewed with the employee present, not hidden inside monthly reports. Darius nodded. Good. Caroline looked toward the reading room, where Denise's children sat beside Maya beneath the blue walls. Have you forgiven me? The question was quiet. Darius took his time. Forgiveness is not pretending the moment did not matter. Caroline waited. It is deciding the moment does not get to control every one that follows. Her eyes softened. Then yes. Then keep showing up. Caroline smiled. Saturday, 8 o'clock. 7:45, he said. We have another shelf to fix. Outside, Samuel's shuttle pulled away from the curb beneath a clear Baltimore sky. Inside, children opened books at tables built by people who had once been overlooked. Caroline set her phone inside a drawer, and sat beside a boy struggling with a reading worksheet. Darius watched from the doorway, then turned toward the next task, waiting for his hands. He never used his money to make her feel small. He used his dignity to help her see people clearly. And in a world that often mistakes power for worth, his quiet kindness became the strongest thing in the room.